Hello, my friends. It's time. It's time-ish. So we've got like an ad break coming up in 90 seconds to 2 minutes because I'm a Twitch big shot now and I make money from ads, man. I made like 20 cents last month. So we are gonna start after it should be a once per hour 3 minute ad break. It'll be interesting to see if I make anything from this video. That's not my intent. I would really rather have that stuff turned off, but they're kind of like forcing me to do that at this point. Mang's the good boy. He is my emotional support puppy today. Hello, Crabble. Hello, Rain. How are you guys doing? I'm going to do my best to be a balance between informative, funny, and not absolutely heartbroken, which is a tall order, but hopefully we can at least, I don't want to say let's try to forget our troubles, but I'm hoping that in some way, a small amount, we can at least shelve our troubles for a little bit and have a good time. So this dude is all tuckered out. We had a hell of a play today. It's just, his hip is all better. He sprained his hip for a little while. It's all better, and he's back to like running circles around other dogs at the dog parks and spinning and jumping through hoops and weaving between my legs and all sorts of good stuff. So we're doing well over here. So I think that ad break should be like any second now. If you're subscribed, which some of you guys are against my wishes, you'll get to hang out with me for 3 minutes, but the rest of y'all are gonna see some ads in a couple of minutes. Yeah, I'm gonna make that money, man. Yeah, my day job doesn't pay enough. It doesn't pay enough. I gotta support. Gotta work that side hustle. Duck life. I do love that duck emote. That's pretty great. Love that. That's a nice puppy. I think he's trying to get down at this point. So, ad break any second now. I will see you guys in a couple of minutes. Much love. All right. Welcome to the presentation, Reeving Effectively. So I have done a lot of reeving over the years, especially in the past year, especially in the past like 3 or 5 years since my athleticism started. I didn't want to say winding down, but I could definitely admit that my competitive levels are not quite as high as they used to be. And I've spent a lot more time reeving after my injury in 2016. But just to recap, who am I? Tato. Master Reeve in 2013. 19 career Kingdom level tournament wins. Way more losses than that. Just way more losses than that. So the reason that I am putting this down here is I've been in a lot of tournaments in a lot of different places. I think I've had wins that are just across I think it was 6 or 7 kingdoms the last time I counted. Every time I reminisce, the number goes up. It's either 6 or 7. But what I'm trying to say is I've been in tournaments like all across the country, so I have a pretty solid average of like when things are run well and how they are run when they are run well. So we don't have a ton of time for me to just sit here and appeal to you like why you should listen to me. You're already here, and we've got 50 slides to get through. There's a lot of information about here. I think our behavior was fine last time, but I just want to go over the rules again. So the first thing that I think that people should do is just introduce yourself in the chat by your wax name so that people kind of have an idea of who they're talking to. It also helps for like accountability so we don't have people just like trolling people on chat for no particular reason. Be polite and respectful. We've got mods and such sitting here making sure that things go well. So just don't go there. Don't go there. And if you have questions, ask them. The last stream that I did not have like a good organization for my slides, but this time I created some special space, so I'm not going to have to turn the chat on and off. So I'm way more likely to see your questions this time, so you can ask them at any time. And I'll probably stop and answer them as I see them. So I want to start with what are not the goals of reeving, right? Like a lot of the time people don't really understand, like, what are we trying to do in this specific, and it's more specific than you might think. So our goal is not to run the tournament smoothly. That not everyone is responsible for that, and in addition, the smoothness of the tournament a lot of the time is dictated by the conduct of individual fighters, as well as like just the head reeve drawing up brackets correctly and communicating and advertising correctly. So it's not really within our control, and I think most of this presentation is from the specific perspective. That's not like the head reeve organizing everything. That's just not where I get questions from. Where I get questions from is like how I see specific shots, how I position myself, and how am I going to reeve like individual fights smoothly and correctly. Sitting here drinking with Cord and Vardos. Nice to see the three of you guys. You should idle on your phone. Log in, get my ad revenue up, bud. This puppy cam's not going to buy itself. So thanks for tuning in. So our goal is also not to ensure that everyone leaves happy. Good fucking luck with that. Yeah, 35-person tournament, about 34 people are not going to go home happy. They're going to go home unhappy. And I have an explanation for this that's kind of tucked in later to the presentation, but there's a specific reason where, like, happiness is not our goal here. We have a very specific goal. Our goal is not to find the best fighter for the day. The best fighter loses sometimes. There have been times when I've shown up to tournaments like sick and haven't won, even though I was like the best dude on the day. There were some times where I've been the best dude on the day and I've just lost because the other guy had like a great day and I didn't have a particularly good day. And it's also not up to us to try to identify personally, like, who is the best fighter that's there for the day. The best fighter isn't always who you think it is. So we want to just like take that out of our mind for the day and just focus on our real goal. So what is our real goal when we are reeving? Oh, and as an aside, like if you're here from cross gaming, so reeving is a term that's just like the referee of the fight. I think in DAG and Balagarth, it's called a herald, and I believe in Darkon it's called an elder. I think in HEMA it's called a referee because those people seem to have a very tight organization and are very practical, which I appreciate. So it's just reeving is just refereeing, right? So what is our real goal for reeving? And so I racked my brain, and this is the best actual actionable goal that I could come up with. For each individual fight, what we are trying to do is construct a factually accurate narrative of the order of events and their outcomes, and apply that narrative to the rules consistently to identify the winner of the fight, right? And you'll notice I'm not saying like a definitive play-by-play list of things that happen. Like there's a reason for that. It is next to impossible to get completely accurate, and we have to allow ourselves some forgiveness when we're trying to adjudicate a high-speed sport without any kind of technological assistance. So we're not stopping at trying to decide the winner of a fight, because sometimes someone will look like the winner, but when you examine the events more carefully, they are not the person that won. What we are trying to do is enumerate what actually happened during the fight with the help of the other reeves who are supporting us, and to a lesser extent, the individual fighters who are also in attendance. So, there's three phases of a tournament fight. So this is a situation that is like, I am sitting here with my couple of people, my couple of reeves, and we're going to reeve one tournament fight. These are the three phases. So the first phase, and people skip this a lot or don't apply it consistently, but this is the setting expectations phase, and we're going to talk about this somewhat. But most people skip it or don't handle it very well, but this is like listing any specialized rules like shield sizes, open category limitations, etc. I think it's probably best to keep a living document for your kingdom of like what your actual expectations are in a tournament by tournament kind of document, because a lot of the time that stuff doesn't transfer between tournaments, and that information and historical knowledge and context is lost. So establishing a living document of that stuff is very helpful. Phase 2 is the fight. it's the fight. It's the fighting that people do. Phase 3 is clarification. So we are mostly focusing on how to do that well. So it's the clarification phase is most of what we're concerned with as Reeves. So before we start talking about like concrete ways to improve our reeving, we need to understand something very critical about the human brain. Attention and memory is a resource. It is a finite resource. It is very limited. We have to respect that about ourselves, and we have to plan around our ability to focus for a length of time and accurately recall information. We have to understand that it's fairly short. So we don't really have cameras that we're able to use for this, right? I know that people bring cameras to film sometimes, but they're not useful in the moment. They're really only useful for like calling out cheaters after the fact, which is like really healthy and good, and we should always do that. It's not really a good use of time. Very cathartic sometimes if you've been cheated, but it's not usually very helpful. When you film fights, a lot of the time it's just visible on your phone screen. So like trying to watch this highly detailed video on a phone screen is just not helpful. And it's usually from one angle. It's usually shaky. It's usually the person is not standing in the right location for it anyway because they're trying not to get in the Reeves or fighters' ways. So it's not very helpful. Additionally, so there's a limited length of time that you can focus. There's a limited number of things that you can focus on at once, and there are a limited numbers of things that you can see from a given vantage point. So the information from a fight, like what you see, is stored in your working memory, which is, I'm not a psychologist or neurologist or anything like that, but I think as I understand it, your short-term memory is like the ability to recall things that you've seen without really thinking very accurately about it. Was your without thinking very actively about it. And your working memory is more like things that you are actively trying to recall and you are consciously thinking about. So you have a very short time limit to the amount of things that you can see and remember, and we have to be able to plan around that and accommodate for that human limitation. So we need to limit distraction as much as possible. So like some tips that I've got are like coaching and jeering from the sidelines should be met with sanctions since it takes Reeves' concentration out of the fight, reduces their ability to remember and recall things and even see things at some point. It's also distracting towards the competitor. It's also like super annoying like as a competitor to deal with, whether it's like for me or against me. Like it's a high speed, accuracy, reaction time based sport. It's just not something I wanted to deal with when I was competing. And joking behavior should probably be limited somewhat. A lot of people like goof off in tournaments to just blow off steam and stuff. But to be honest with you, sometimes it goes on so long or it is too funny. And like, yes, the Reeves like enjoy it, but it still harms people's ability to remember things and kind of adds to the context of the fight where I think that should be like limited to an extent. Just a suggestion. So I want to identify 3 kinds of Reeves, and I think there is a distinction that I've kind of come up with that is important for a workflow of Reeving that I would like to present. So we've got the head Reeve. Everyone's heard of them. They're responsible for setting their expectations. They're responsible for disqualification decisions. Pit Reeves, regular Reeves should not be like making those kinds of decisions on their own unilaterally, unless like the head Reeve was like, I don't want to deal with this today, just kick people out if you need to. And I think the head Reeve should normally not be Reeving individual fights. They should just be like taking their notes, keeping tallies, keeping points, keeping people on deck, keeping people informed, that kind of thing. So the Reeve, the 2 distinctions that I want to create between the normal types of Reeves that we think about is lead Reeves and then pit Reeves. So a pit Reeve is just like a normal Reeve, but a lead Reeve is the one we're going to be talking the most about. And I think that they should be a designated position while you are Reeving a fight with other Reeves. And we should identify like what they are specifically responsible for that is greater than just watching and saying, oh, I saw this shot happen, that kind of thing. So this, the lead Reeve is the lead that's responsible, lead Reeve. I should have named this something that was a little bit less of a tongue twister. The lead Reeve is responsible for leading the clarification phase in an individual pit. They conduct a post-fight interview of fighters and reeves as necessary. They're responsible for a final decision on win, loss, or reset. And they should probably be the most experienced fighter in the pit. The pit being like the fight and its reeves. So it has the fighters in both 2 or 4 reeves as you're able to find them. And a pit reeve is just a regular reeve. They're just responsible for whether or not they see specific shots and blocks, and they report their perspective to the lead reeve. I think in addition, pit reeve, just a normal reeve, should be responsible for like keeping a running tally of the wins and losses on their fingers so that the lead reeve just doesn't have to think about that. Yes, thank you, Cord. Appreciate that. It's tempting. I might get some whiskey myself, man. It's been a hell of a day. Be strong, Tates. You can do this. You promised you would. So this is my reeving workflow proposal. So this is something that I think good reeves kind of already do, but don't know, can't articulate exactly how and why they know what to do and what those specific phases are. But I tried to like break down my process and put it into a workflow that's just like a general template for reeving a fight to help people make better decisions and understand what they're actually responsible for. So I would call them a face reeve because they do the talking and lead interactions. That's not bad. I like that too. Lead reeve, face reeve, that's fine. As long as it's not like head reeve because we've already used that. I'm going to stick with lead reeve because I practiced this presentation once, but if you want to call it something else, that's fine. So the workflow proposal that I've got here for you guys is number 1, setting expectations. Number 2, the fight. 3, a fighter's recap. 4 is an optional request for clarification. And this step 4, kicks off steps 4 through 7, 5 through 7. And then, which are lead reeve states the current narrative. Lead confers with pit reeves. He confers with the fighters, and then they make the final call. Face reeve implies the existence of a heel reeve. The heel reeve is the evil reeve, right? He's the one that's like, oh, that hits you. I know that it hits you. You get out of here, right? He's the one that's like, oh, the steel chairs are over there behind the turnbuckle. I love the heel reeve. Actually, I'm gonna close this presentation down. I'm gonna edit my PowerPoint. I've made some mistakes. I can admit to that. We gotta start over. I'm gonna run some ads while I work on my PowerPoint. And if y'all can just stay on the channel and watch the ads till I'm done with the PowerPoint, that would be sick. So this is the reeving workflow proposal that I've got for you guys. So we're gonna go through each step and what consists of those things. So the first one is setting expectations. So this saves time in the pits when you do it well so that the individual reeves do not have to recap what is expected of them. Some of the expectations that you would set are like when to start and stop fighting, what are the arena boundaries, any remaining rules are clarified, like shield size. Like, how do you measure a dome shield? We know how you measure the dome shield. It is across the dome. Stop measuring it across the back of the dome, which is not a real plane, is an intangible idea that lets people carry large shields into medium shield tournaments. So we know what that is. Or sword length. How many weapons in open can be brought in? 1 per hand. 1 per hand, please. Those are opinions, but these things should be clarified so that you're not trying to clarify them ad hoc in the middle of the tournament. Like after, the worst case scenario is like you're clarifying like after someone has already used it, and then you're like, well, we can't change the rules. So clarifying all this stuff up front ahead of time is extremely helpful. So hello to the raccoon. It's a star on our channel. And yeah, they're good. I'm glad Jay Lee gets the heel reeve lesson. Heel reeve joke. Yeah. All right, step 2 is the fight. Sick whacks are exchanged. The guys fight, fighters fight. They do their thing. The Reeves are watching. You know how this goes. It doesn't need explained. Step 3 is the fighter's recap. So this is after the fighters essentially like come to a conclusion, or when they are stopped by the other Reeves. The fighters give a recap of what they think happened in plain, simple language, right? So usually the loser should volunteer that they were struck. Any fighter may accept or reject a win by invalidating their own shots, right? So like if I am fighting Crabble and we hit each other in the shoulder at the same time, and I say, hey, like my shot was late because I like turned my hand over or I was out of time, like that should be respected, because there's probably something that I know about my own shot that I threw that is probably the most accurate perspective on that shot. Just in the case of like invalidating your own shots when they are thrown. I'm not talking about like I felt my sword hit you and kill you. That's not the same thing. But if I say my own shot doesn't count, you should probably just accept that unless you have an extremely compelling reason not to. So the recap should be done once, succinctly. I believe that fighters can and should practice their post-fight articulation skills. It's an easy thing to drill where you just say like, hey, we're going to talk about this at fighter practice. It's a skill that you should have. You should be able to talk about what happened clearly and succinctly. It helps the Reeves. It helps you learn. It helps you teach. It's just an area where you should spend some time. You can even like record it and think to yourself afterwards, like, do I sound sensible when I'm describing what happens here? Is my perspective accurate? Like, it's a good drill. Hello to Skunk, who I think crawled across the keyboard at this point. So, and you can stop here if both fighters seem agreeable on the outcome, if you feel like the result is fairly clear and they seem amicable about it. And that's like 80% of fights. It's really just the contentious ones that we want to talk about and figure out how to adjudicate. Step 4 is a request for clarification. So it's probably not necessary in 80% of cases. Like, people usually know what happened. I like to think that most people take their shots. So any Reeve can interject if something's in awry and like stop the fight and reset it or bookmark it and rewind it to a specific point. And I think any fighter or Reeve should be able to request that clarification. So I want to note that even if no clarification is requested, you as the lead Reeve, you should still have a factually accurate narrative of the order of the events of the fight. If you don't, you need clarification. Like, you need to know what happened. You don't want to sit there and let them fight it out and then say, like, the fighters will just say, like, this is the result. You should know the result. If you don't know the result, you either need to watch more closely, adjust your positioning, practice fighting more because it helps you Reeve, or you need to ask for that clarification from the fighters and check with the other Reeves. You don't want to just stop at, like, both fighters call dead. If you don't understand, you need to figure it out, because what can happen a lot of the time is that people will kind of bow to the force of a person's personality and just like accept their death, when even they may have like won or something may not have counted, a shot might have been missed. Like, don't just stop if you don't just proceed if you don't understand what happens. Make sure that you have that factually accurate narrative of what happened. Step 5. The lead Reeve states the current narrative. So you get that fighter's recap, and then the lead Reeve says, okay, as I understand it right now, I do have tips for positioning. That's in later slides. We are going to talk about that. So the lead Reeve states the current narrative to their best of their understanding after facilitating the fighter's input and their own perception of events, right? And the lead Reeve's limitation is they are only on one side of the fight, so they have to understand that they probably don't know everything about what happened. So the narrative doesn't have to be definitive at this point. It should include any questions or moments of uncertainty that could be clarified with the other Reeves or perhaps the other fighters. You don't have to have a clear answer right away. You just want to provide a starting point for that adjudication. Step 6. The lead confers with the other pit Reeves. So the lead Reeve confers with each pit Reeve to establish factuality, right? So what that means is, if you're the lead Reeve and you're on the opposite side of a money shot that landed on the hip of the opponent that's across from you, and you do not have the best vantage point, you confer with the pit reeve to say, hey, did you see where that money shot landed? Was it like hip? Was it leg? Did it catch board? Did it catch their pommel instead? You want to say something like, did you see X shot contact fighter 2 on your side? So the pit reeve should use their best judgment, and they shouldn't just say, I don't know. I hate that. You volunteered. You have to at least take a guess, right? So you need to say something like it either clearly, probably, or maybe did or did not hit. You have to give some kind of an estimate. If you're more comfortable, you can use like a numerical percentage where you're like, hey, I'm like 60% sure that hit. I find that like, I would wager that using a numerical percentage would feel like less personal than saying like clearly hit. So I think that may be something that's easier to be able to do. Sometimes people are like afraid of giving strong feedback. Like if you are pretty sure it hit, but you want to soften that a little bit, you say, okay, well, I'm like 80% sure that hit. And that kind of gives the fighter a little bit of leeway if they're like accidentally making a bad call, that there is some chance that they might have missed it. So numerical percentages are fine. So saying you don't know is not a valid answer from a pit reeve. Like, you signed up to do this. You have to concentrate. You have to try. You have to take the emotional risk to try to make a call with the understanding that you may be wrong. You have to make your peace with that, or you are not helping. You are harming things instead, as opposed to helping. So if a pit reeve indicates a clear hit on their respective side, that should be accepted. In the case of probably or maybe, it ends up going back to the lead reeve to make a judgment call based on the information that's available on their side of the fight, and also the confidence interval of the pit reeve who said it, right, or saw it, right? So if you had, for example, maybe you had a pit reeve who said, I'm like 40% sure that money shot was hip, but the lead reeve can see from their side maybe that their hand was much lower than they thought, or the opponent's like leg was turned in such a way that it's unlikely that it made it past their thigh. Like if the leg is turned towards the path of the shot, they can take that into account and say that, if you're only 40% sure, I'm pretty certain from my own side that didn't hit either. So you want to you want to use the information from the pit reeve on the opposite side of the fight to make your call, to base your call on, but you can also add in your own perspective because it is still helpful even if it's like on the wrong side. Step 7, the lead confers with the fighters. So the lead reeve should talk to the other fighters to support the narrative. These are some examples of things that people might say. So if like fighter A is like, I did not hit them, you should always accept and respect that. They know if they hit them or not. Well, maybe not always, but I would say like 95% of the time, that should just be respected. If fighter A says, my shot was not in time, timing is a little bit different. You want to think carefully, but you would lean carefully. You would probably lean towards accepting it since they're invalidating their own shot. But one issue that can happen is people's sense of timing can tighten, and they actually perceive time to be moving a little bit slower than it actually is, and call their shot out of time, or I guess moving faster than it actually is. And alternatively, like, they could be throwing like way out of time too, right? If they're like trying to cheat or something, or just experience that time dilation in general under stress. So you want to think carefully about like timing questions. So those are different, right? Like targeting questions, you should probably take the fighter's advice on their targeting of their own shot when they say they did not hit. Timing, you usually accept, but you want to think critically about what you just saw. So fighter B, the person who was struck, says, oh, they didn't hit me. That's not fucking helpful. Like, the fighter B should be able to say, I blocked that hit my hand, that did not hit my shoulder, it landed on my arm, it hit my neck and not my shoulder, that kind of thing. But if they just say they did not hit me, that's not helpful. That should be disregarded. If fighter B says, I did not feel anything, that's very suspicious. If you cannot articulate your part in combat, you should reflect if you should be fighting at all. Like, you have to be able to play your side of the game, or you're not playing the game. You're just hitting people in the park with sticks, which is like a crime if it's not a game. Yeah, if you can't feel things, you should go to the doctor. They're very helpful with feelings some of the time. They're very helpful with physical feelings specifically. So Fighter B says something like, I believe that broke off my guard. A small portion of the shot touched me, but I think it was not valid. That's helpful, but you need to balance that very carefully against the Pit Reeves narrative and the details that they provided, and the fighter's conduct throughout the den, and the context of that fighter in general, which we are going to talk a lot about, a little bit uncomfortably, perhaps, but we will see. Step 8. The lead makes the final call. So the lead Reeve balances the different elements of that narrative as they've been presented by the Pit Reeves and the fighters. There is no magic rule for this. You need to use your gut, and you need to be brave about it. And you need to be willing to make a call and not just reset, right? Do not just reset because you are not sure. You signed up to do this job. You need to be brave and take the risk that you could potentially be wrong. You could potentially upset someone by making the wrong call. It is very likely that you will upset at least one person if you are reading, because people bring a lot of emotions into tournaments. They mess up their perceptions of things a lot of the time. You are not sending everyone unhappy. That is not your job. If you're not making calls, you're not doing any work. So you shouldn't be getting service awards if you're volunteering for Reeving and just standing there not making any calls. That's not work. That does not count. So just, if you sign up to Reeve, just be brave. Understand that you are allowed to make mistakes. You are volunteering for this, but you have to try, and you have to focus, and you have to pay attention. So, as some general tips for being a lead Reeve, there's some internal math or calculus, as it were, that you have to do to balance the narratives. My rule is that the Reeve's total perception is probably worth about 75% of the call when clarification is necessary. A fighter's perception is really only about 25%, unless they willingly declare themselves as the loser of the fight. It's probably preferable to make an incorrect call over a no call. So if you continually reset, right, when people fight each other, there are you never just beat someone that you're better than all the time. That never happens. You have to be so much goddamn better than someone to beat them multiple times in a row that it is just a vanishingly small chance of being able to do that more than a couple of times. And in addition, the person who won the fight likely opened on them aggressively, and now the person who lost the fight but made it confusing and got a reset instead, now they've seen that person's attack and they're not going to get hit with it again, right? So what ends up happening is, if you keep resetting, the winner, because they win a higher percentage, they become due essentially for a loss. So that works against the person who is actually winning those fights. So you need to do your best that you can to make a definitive call with what you see, and you would only reset in the most unclear of circumstances. And I would posit, frankly, that if this situation is that unclear, someone is fucking cheating. There shouldn't be tons of resets that are not clear simultaneous kills. It shouldn't happen. And I guess the last tip for a general leading as a Reeve is there is no one-size-fits-all workflow. There is a lot of general stuff that you have to think about and pay attention to in order to be a good Reeve. It takes a lot of experience. I think it takes a lot of fighting experience, but this is the best start to finish workflow that I would use if I am trying to adjudicate a tournament well. So this is a question that I get a lot, is how do I see the fight more accurately, right? Well, I've been fighting for 20 to 25 years, and I gotta break it to you, most of that shit is just experience. If there is one thing that you, my friends, take from me, is that no skill is hard. No skill is actually hard. Emotions are hard. That part is valid. But skill execution is predetermined by the amount of work that you put in up until you use that skill. And you can either do it or you can't, but it's not hard. You just show up and you do the thing. So if you want to be a better Reeve by being a better fighter, you have to understand it. It's not hard, but you have to show up. You have to show up consistently. You have to keep trying, but it is not hard. So it's just like, I guess I feel like it's not, how to put it. It's not something that you try super hard to do, like in the moment. You can fail to do it if you don't try enough, but there is no like amount of trying and focusing effort that is going to extend your expertise beyond your level of training. You have to train for that level, and then you try to meet that level, but it's not hard. It's just like time consuming. So we got a question: what are tips for non-coms to get better since we don't get the benefit of fighting teaching us? So fighting is hands down the best way to do that. If you want to Reeve well as a non-combatant, I'm going to be frank that you're never going to approach the skill level of someone who puts in a lot of time fighting. However, I do have some suggestions for that. You need to, I think they're on subsequent slides, but you essentially need to build a very strong basic vocabulary of shots. You need to know how they're all done and how they're executed. And you need to spend a lot of time like watching tape. So if you're someone who like wants to volunteer, but you've got like injuries and can't physically train to increase your skill set there, you just want to spend like an hour, 2 hours a week just watching film of fighting, listening to the Reeves, listening to shots that they take. You can watch, you can try to practice Reeving and talk with the fighters. You just have to build like a basic subconscious vocabulary. We're going to talk a little bit more deeply about that. That can be done with tape up to an extent. It's never going to replace fighting. It's never going to be quite as good. But I would say that like a person could Reeve like a Shire, baronial, maybe even like a newer ducal attorney with just tape, and do so pretty effectively. Like when you get into kingdom level stuff, that's when you need people with a lot of actual fighting experience. There's also like if you're a non-com and you're training up, you could probably be a pretty effective pit Reeve, especially in a situation where there's like 4 Reeves instead of 2, but you have to advocate for that position to be available to you because most people want to run tournaments with just 2 Reeves, and we're going to talk about that too. So there's like some solutions. You have to accept that like it's possible that being a lead Reeve is going to be a little bit too difficult in those higher level tournaments, and you're not going to know where to start, but you could probably be a pretty decent pit Reeve by just learning the vocabulary of the shots from like the CG Jojo drill list, talking with regular fighters, watching a lot of tape and practicing. So we got a second question. This is why I argue that tournaments are a poor objective metric for Warlord. I feel like that's a big discussion, and I'm going to run away on that tangent. It's I guess you could argue that it's a poor objective measure when it's not done well. And I would say that our goal is to make it objective as possible. And that is the focus of this presentation. But I think my gut is something like, thanks, Gordon. I figured it was you because you've expressed this opinion before. I appreciate that a lot. My feeling is that just because it's not completely objective, I get where you're coming from, where like there were a lot of warlords back in the day being like, this is completely objective. Fuck no, man. Half that shit was like some WWE stuff. I think one thing that this presentation will make clear is when you're committed to the truth about like what is actually happening, and it's related to my last stream too with fighting misconceptions. That's probably also related to our like modern political state, is that like it's real fucking easy to lie about stuff, and when you're not married to the actual truth of what is happening in the factuality. The people that want to bring that back to factual have to jump through some serious goddamn hoops to make that done. So this presentation is like, this is how it would jump through said hoops. Whether or not it approaches objective or not, I would like to make as objective as possible, and that's our goal today. So I think that's a good point. I would love to have that discussion later, preferably over whiskey, but you got to have it fast because I'm going to mow through your bourbon closet too quick. All right, so back on topic. So there's 3 main ways to accomplish this. Technically, there's 4 because this is this junk comment. Way 3 is watching tape, as we discussed. Appropriate positioning during the fight, which we were talking about, like where to stand for the best vantage point. And then there's fighting. So for this is my amazing diagram. So you're right, this is a huge rabbit hole. Maybe we should drink and explore this in another stream. Yeah, I feel like I would love to be drinking during this presentation in these streams, but I need more practice before I give presentations while drinking bourbon. Or maybe this is a good time to practice the drinking bourbon part of it. I don't know. I'm tempted, but we're going to persevere as best we can. So blue, this powder blue is fighters, and then these gold smiley faces, these are our reeves. So if you got 2 reeves, this is where you stand. Very simple. But the thing that I want to note is you have to... No 10 humans can make it through my bourbon closet alive. Goals. I feel like I win either way because, like, if I go through the whole bourbon closet and I don't make it, at least I'm out of this horrifying thresher of existence. And those bourbons are so good. And scotches, too. They're amazing. Good thing Mike's not human. Appreciate that. I'm a little human. I'm getting more human all the time, man. It sucks. So gold smiley faces are reeves. Powder blue is fighters. My favorite part of this diagram is the powder blue guys are like a little bit squished. This is the position that you want to maintain. The note that I want to add to this is you want to maintain this position. So if these guys rotate, you need to rotate with them so that you are standing here for the best vantage point. So I really recommend that you try to get 4 reeves for a pit if possible. You will get way better results from that. But if you got 2 reeves, this is the classic position. It's the best we can do. It sucks, but you need to make sure that, like, if this dude here backs way up, that you don't stand here like a fool while this dude charges after him and you can't see anything except this guy's back. Like, you need to follow them and watch from this position. It is not that hard to catch up. You are jogging in a linear fashion. It is very fast. This guy is backpedaling, and this guy is like maintaining their footwork as they move forward. Like, you can keep up with them. You have to do it. Like, maintain this position. Don't like let people run off. If you feel like you really can't catch up with them, call a hold and stop them and bring them back or something. But don't let them careen off into a position where you can't adjudicate anymore. You should move with them. Or you can use like a sensible boundary, but you still, if these guys are rotating around like a square ring, you still have to rotate with them to maintain those axes. So this is better, right? And I think you would get a lot more non-con reeves would really help with this, because only one of these dudes needs to be a lead reeve, and those other reeves that are trained up on video and at fighter practices would be really helpful, because here you are responsible for very little. So the way this works is, 4 reeves, 2 fighters. This guy, he's looking at just this side of this fighter. This reeve is looking at just this side of this fighter. This reeve is looking at just this side. And this reeve is looking at just this side. And yes, like as you swing at each other, your eyes are going to naturally drift to the target locations, but you want to just make sure that you look back to the fighter that you're looking at. And this way works so much better because this lead reeve up here can now consult everybody on every angle that they can't see, and the resource of everyone's memory and attention is directed at an extremely small subset of possibilities, instead of trying to have their eyes dart back and forth between opponents and just like go wall-eyed and see the shots of two people swinging at each other simultaneously. That shit's impossible. I don't know why we try to do that. We really need more people to volunteer to Reeve. It would be amazing to get 4. We had it for the Lotus Games, and it went well. It went better than the rest of our tournaments, but you really want 4 Reeves. There's a slightly different position for sword and board. So we've got these shields. These are shields. I'm so sorry that when I made this diagram, I realized that these are technically both left-handed fighters. Then which never happens. But if that's offensive to you, I'm sorry. But these are 2 left-handed guys. And you can see that this Reeve is offset a little bit on this shield side so that he can see this fighter's back, shoulders, and hips. So they're not the whole way behind them, but they're oriented to the top. You have very little faith in Glenn. He could absolutely fight himself. That guy is so tall and his reach is so long that I'm sure he could reach the whole way around the world with his hip scoop, man. You want to be situated so you can see their shoulders, hips, and back around the bottom of their shield because they are not going to get hit in the body in front of their shield. And if they do, this person on this side is very likely to be able to see it as well as this person. As well as this person. And then this person is also shifted a little bit behind this shield, which looks like a very funny hat because it felt like it was confusing when I turned the shield upside down, like what it was anymore. So you just want to make sure that you maintain a slightly offset position so that you can see their back and hip, because it's not useful to look at the front of their shield. I know they have like some really cool like stained glass shields and stuff. It's not useful to us. So you want to maintain this position, and again, you want to rotate with the fighters as they circle around each other and maintain this vantage point. This can be tricky because you have to indicate to the other fighters, like now you're orbiting in a way that's a little bit more complicated. You may need to reverse directions to accommodate for like a quick change in direction, but you want to keep people as close as you can to this orientation. So these are some lessons about fighting to improve at Reeving. So you need to build, and I think this is still applicable to the non-com Reeve training that we've talked about, because you can do this in other ways. I don't know that it'll ever let you hit that level where you're going to be super, super sharp as comparable like as a fighter would be, but I think that you can probably get pretty close, and you can certainly get close enough to be extremely helpful if you volunteer. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to build a subconscious vocabulary that rapidly informs your brain of what postures mean, what target is likely. So shots, they have 2 phases, movements in general do. You have a loading phase and an unloading phase. So a loading phase of a shot is when you take a braced position to kind of like power up to be able to throw your shot. It's like the startup frames in a fighting game. It's the wind up before the pitch. It's this position. And essentially what will happen is if you look at fighting long enough, you are going to build a vocabulary for like, okay, when Tato has his arm like this, that means he's going to chop vertically. When Tato has his arm like this, that means he's probably going to wrap. If Tato has his arm like this, a little bit diagonal, that means he's probably going to drop for a money shot. So that's just good fighting in general. But what you're trying to do is your brain builds this language in the background that says those starting positions mean that I need to move my eyes to this likely target to see if that shot is going to land. And you also want to learn all of the basic vocabulary of shots. So it's regional, so you need to participate in your fighter practices or at least like work with your local fighters. And you can also use the CG Dojo Pell list. So it's important to know, like, you got to know what a flat wrap is. You got to know what a full wrap is. You got to know what a reverse wrap is, a hook stab. It helps you articulate precisely what happened to the other Reeves, and it helps you understand what a fighter is talking about when they try to describe what happened to you. So you need to know all of those terms. I didn't manage to put all those together because there's tons and tons and tons of those terms, but that's a good starting point. There's more tips. So you also want to increase your familiarity with the fighting culture in your area. You should just know when all of the fighters in your kingdom hate fighting a specific person. So like, there are a lot of sword knights that have like kind of an honorable reputation, specifically among people who are non-coms, whose shot taking is like absolutely horrific. you need to be on the lookout for that kind of stuff, because a lot of the time people will use that knightly reputation to affect a lot of abuse on people who are training really hard and working really hard to accomplish things for themselves, right? So, oh, I just met my follower goal. Nice. We got 110. Thanks to whoever just followed. I appreciate you. So, at best, if you're not familiar with the people in your kingdom and their fighting and who's like good at taking their shots and who's bad at taking their shots, at best it's being out of touch. Somewhere in the middle, like you are on some level avoiding the discomfort of that confrontation as a Reeve, the job that you signed up to do, and the person who is making everybody else miserable. You are delaying that confrontation and making someone else face it for you when it's your job to do that for the position that you volunteered for. And at worst, you are unknowingly or knowingly participating in this scheme where this cheating person is essentially using other people to build up their own self-esteem and essentially hurt theirs by not playing by the rules. So you need to be aware of these things to the best of your extent. You need to talk with people about like who has good reputations and who has bad reputations. There are concrete reasons for that. So true impartiality is fucking impossible. It's impossible. And I have a feeling that our desire to be completely impartial when we're reading essentially ends in this deadlock where we just ask people to keep resetting and keep fighting until the more sensible person says, this is fucking ridiculous, and gives up. So, like, you gotta accept that there's a level of impartiality that is inappropriate, especially in situations where you only have 2 Reeves. We need at least 4, and if we're gonna get like really objective and really factual about it, there's a lot of like technological equipment that we would need to make it completely objective and completely fair, and we can't. So we need to exercise some partiality by having an intelligently informed context of the people that we're working with and the habits that we see to guide us and help us focus on where do we need to put our attention in these fights, right? How do you incentivize Reeves to get 4? Well, that is a freaking good question. Motivation is very complex. I am not a... I tend to be pretty solid at leadership type stuff, but that's more of like force of personality and momentum and good timing and being able to sense the mood of things. So that's not always something that I like have a direct beat on. So maybe you could do something like if you were running a tournament and you wanted to like get like you should definitely recommend people for awards. You should definitely thank them. You can honor them during court a little bit. If you want to spend some money, you can get them like some drinks and some pizza or something and be like, this is for the Reeves. Everybody in capitalism loves a fucking pizza party, right? I'm ready for management. So get this Reeves some goddamn pizza. You could just incentivize it in small ways. I think the way that you would actually get 4 people is you would post on your kingdom before a tournament and say, hey, Tato proposed this system of reaving with 4 people at once, so we really need new volunteers to try this out. And then you would take notes on that and try to see like, hey, was this successful? How did our people feel about executing this with 4 Reeves? Did it feel like it was better? And you get people excited about it, hype it up, be really grateful to people like Kenty is saying. That's the best info that I can give you. There's no easy solution there, right? It's like a human interest and motivation problem that I don't have a concrete answer to. Not shitting on them or letting others do so is a good start. Yeah, absolutely. Nobody should be mouthing off to the Reeves. You should get thrown the fuck out if you do that. Like, I know I'm being a little bit hard on people right now who are interested in Reeving by saying like, hey, you have to step up. You have to be vulnerable. You have to make those calls. You have to be brave. Like, you have to do that shit. And the trade is you got to not mouth off to those fucking Reeves when they have taken the vulnerable step of saying, okay, I'm going to volunteer for my group and I'm going to send someone home unhappy to make this a fair game for the people who are going to participate fairly. Like, that's that's a fair trade for your vulnerability. It's like basic respect. So if people are like shitting on Reese and being assholes, like they should be thrown out. They should be thrown out immediately for that. Personal invitations in a PM are magically effective. Yeah, that's smart too. I think that a lot of the times, if you ask people specifically, they're willing to respond. I would like to push it culturally that fighters. I mentioned this in my last stream. Fighters need to take tournaments off and not compete in every single one and Reeve, or you are not going to have good fighting to try to win at all. So you do need to contribute, and you do need to recognize, like, if you want good Reeves, unequivocally, your good fighters are going to be your best Reeves. You got to help out. you need to help out. You have the skills to do that. As a fighter, you are responsible for volunteering for that. Yeah, I'm going to try to keep saying it as loudly as I can. So keeping the game peaceable and enjoyable takes precedence over being totally fair. We don't want to be caught up in impartiality to a point where we get hamstrung and then miss both of these goals, because like a lack of calls makes it not very peaceable. A lot of the time, if you have someone who's continually cheating their way up through the bracket, it also makes it not enjoyable, right? So it ruins both of those. And you also have to take context into account. So new players get gentler corrections for not taking shots. Experienced players not taking shots should be ejected. Real fucking sure why you don't get suspended or banned for blatantly cheating in tournaments. Like, that's like the worst thing that you can do. That makes people stop playing the game. That's the worst like game thing that you can do. I'm not talking about the social aspects like harassment and stuff like that. Obviously, that's much, much more grave than my silly tournaments. But if you can't play the game, I don't know why you're here. I don't know why you're here. Professional referees also make bad calls all the time, but we don't have the resources to review tape accurately. So we need to do the best that we can to be as impartial as we can, but not be hamstrung by this idea that we need to be absolutely fucking perfect. And since we're not perfect, we're going to make no calls. So our solution to paralysis by impartiality, we're going to accept that we cannot be totally impartial. You need to not allow your desire to meet an impossible standard stop you from doing work. We need to confidently do the best that we can with the information in front of us. And we need to respect our attention and our memory and our focus as a precious resource. And we need to make sure that people aren't intentionally trying to exhaust or damage that in some way. And we also need to look at the context of the fighters themselves and the fights that are unfolding. So we probably got about 90 seconds for an ad break, if my napkin math is correct. So we'll be back on in about 3 minutes after that. When we come back, we're going to start talking about context questions to ask yourself about fighters, about situations, that kind of deal. And we're going to start getting into the more fun stuff about like common cheating cues, types of cheaters to look out for, and some ways of resolving those situations peaceably. So, and we'll also, after the ad break, we'll get a little bit of puppy time. I will drag this dude back into my lap. He's got some rent to earn. So I will see you all in a couple of minutes. I'm back. My puppy's here. I took Court's suggestion. I'm going to have a little bit of whiskey while I finish off this stream. It's been a hard day. It's going to be a hard 4 fucking years. So I think that I've earned it. So we're going to go back up to Vidalia's question, which was a great one. Their question was, what steps would you like to see from Monarchy regarding cheating? So like if someone is cheating super gratuitously, you can just ban them. You know that, right? Like on some level, if you are keeping someone around who's like cheating continually, there's probably like 10 people over the years or more that have quit because of that person. If you think that that's too draconian, and I think that that's not too draconian, like if you have someone who's continually breaking the rules of play, they've shown that they cannot be trusted to play. But I think the problem really comes into what people do is they start saying like, well, we can't ban people for taking shots. We ban people for like sexual harassment or bigotry and stuff, and those things are not equal. And they are absolutely not equal, but yeah, those are both things where you're unfit to participate for the group. So if that's like too draconian from you for you as a monarch, I think it would be perfectly acceptable to say to someone, especially if like they're disruptive and have been arguing with the Reeves, just lay down a rule that like, hey, no more tournaments for you for a year, and you can try again in a year, and if you can't handle it, you can be banned from tournaments permanently, or even like from field. Like a lot of the times, people are worried about like losing these illustrious service people over disciplining them on their cheating, like on the field or in tournaments and stuff. If you should get a fucking food truck and not deal with that, and charge $5 more for rent, for the event fees, not for rent. God knows rent would be like hundreds of thousands of more dollars, but like just you can suspend or ban them from like elements of playing the game. If they can't be trusted to do so, like, you should show them the door. So then we got Fezzik saying, I'm not sure what else could be done to truly punish cheating besides suspension. I've seen people thrown out of a tournament. That's very rarely. At the end of the day, we seem to rely on ostracizing people as cheaters, but that doesn't seem to work. It feels like those who cheat intentionally really don't mind being known for it if they end up getting wins. Yes, I think I kind of addressed that, where you should be able to suspend people and ban people from participating in tournaments, especially if they are like creating issues in that. It's definitely a CSC violation, which means that it can be enforced, but like, would you want a verbal warning, a tournament ejection, a tournament bans, and a 6-month ban? Like, what do you think process would be ideal? I don't like laying down a super concrete process for that, because it's case by case. There are violations that are super flagrant. There are also matters of opinion. Like, I'm of the opinion that if you slam your swords down on the ground or throw them, you should be suspended immediately. You should be ejected from the tournament and probably suspended. Like, the subtext of slamming your swords on the ground or throwing them is that you are using the earth or your swords as a proxy for what you would like to be doing to the other person's body if it was not illegal. And that's very intimidating. It's very disruptive. Like, I think that should be an immediate objection. But some people may culturally feel like that's not quite as appropriate. I would say one warning. You have to take into account, like, who are you warning? Like, if you are warning a new player, maybe give them 3 warnings, and the punishment would be like, hey, like, it seems like you haven't cultivated your shot taking well enough to do this yet. You need to sit this tournament out, and you can try again at the next one after working with somebody and practicing your fighting for a while. And that's super fair. But if you have someone who's been fighting and cheating for years, like, you should just say, like, hey, like, this makes everyone really fucking unhappy when you play in this tournament. Like, so you're not going to play in tournaments. And they can, like, try to appeal that decision, but that's just my thought process. It's very case by case. You should probably give someone warnings for. You would definitely give people warnings for cheating in tournaments before you eject them, because there is a small chance that it's an accident. I would argue that it's almost never accidental, except in specific circumstances, like the player being very new or having very poor conditioning or being extremely exhausted. But other than that, like, I would say it's like typically intentional, because it's just like, if I could do it, anybody could do it. There's nothing special about me in particular. So anyway, back to the presentation. So context questions to ask yourself. Does this person have and this is about fighters specifically, does the person you're watching have a reputation of adjudicating fairly and competently? So in a 2 Reeves scenario, like, if I know that person's probably going to take their shots, and they're very likely to do so, like, they got 10 Griffins, everybody loves fighting that person, I don't even need to look at them. Like, I can just watch the other guy. I'm not going to spend the resource of my attention asserting that, like, this person who has a great reputation and plays extremely fairly, I'm not going to spend the resource of my attention on that person. I'm going to be watching the other person, and I'm going to be watching the timing of the fight in case they get confused. But it saves me a lot of trouble if I know them well. Do they have a reputation as a cheater? That means I need to pay almost exclusive attention to them. This person is causing issues for other people routinely. The lesser of 2 evils is sending them home mad over an incorrect call. Probably all of their wins that day were a fucking incorrect call. So what's one more to prevent all the other ones from happening, right? It's just very simple math. Is the person that you're watching a poor communicator? So in the clarification phase, you may need to ask specific questions to elicit information from them. I would argue that you need to spend the time to try to develop and cultivate that skill, but you need to pay special attention to the conversation as it evolves, especially like as a lead reeve, and ask good questions. Are they a new player? You may need to help them take their shots. The targets of their shots are usually not complex because they're not throwing wraps and stuff yet. So you can shift your attention to try to focus on the timing of their shots instead of like the actual targeting. So you can kind of like spread your statistics around a little bit differently. Does the person have very poor conditioning, or like are they very out of shape? So I want to make it really clear. This is not an indictment of people who are not in great shape. I am a person who, I have a lot of trouble with my own weight. I have a lot of insecurity about my own weight a lot of the time. I would never, at this point in my life, like shame somebody for being overweight. That's not what this is about. And I have noticed this as my own weight has changed a lot, that this can be true for me too. So in a pools to bracket format, sometimes people with poor conditioning can get so tired that they may need help taking their shots too. They're usually grateful when you help them for that as well. But the problem is that you can get so out of breath that you kind of stop feeling a lot of the shots. Like, it's not an indictment, but you are still responsible as a reeve for making sure that the rules are followed. And I do want to create like a safe space for people to improve their conditioning through exercise. The exercise that is fighting, that is my primary cardio. That is absolutely not an indictment, but it is a situation where you may need to watch them more carefully. So, fight stoppage tips. So this usually happens on a clear, unnoticed hit. So when you see something that has been clearly ignored, you don't want to stop them right away. You allow for a second or two to see if the fighter stops or acknowledges it, and you put a bookmark in the fight, right? So if you think that they got hit in the arm, you give them about 2 seconds to let them stop and clarify, and you call stop. And you back them up to that point in the fight, right? So you don't just like, you don't want to call it right away because it can take like a second to start feeling things. I think most people want to be honest about that, but you need to give them at least a second or two of benefit of the doubt before you call out stop. I like to use stop instead of hold because I feel like stop is easier to say. It's sharper. It just feels like it carries more than hold, which starts with kind of like a softer sound. So you just call stop quickly after that happens, and when you hit that 2 second mark. And as a bonus, when you stop fights, when something confusing happens, it allows the rest of the reeves to kind of clear their internal cache and store more information and reset themselves, so you end up getting better calls. So I'm not saying stop for nothing, but I think it's okay to call a stop on like a confusing exchange, especially if they threw and backed out, and if someone saw something, stop, take a minute, talk it out, reset the cache, and then go again. So here's some tips for the interviewing phase. So it's not always necessary to interview people to clarify. If the losing fighter seems peaceable with the outcome, just use that outcome. If you disagree with their losing, that fight, when they say that they lost, you better have a really good reason, because chances are they are probably correct. If a fighter is adamant that they lost, just let them make the job easier for you. You don't want to work on the weekends, right? Like, just let them do it. So if a fighter declares an unfavorable outcome for themselves, that supersedes your interviewing. You also want to listen for common cues and think deeply about what's being communicated. We are going to go over some of those common cues a little bit later in the presentation. And you also want to limit distraction firmly. No interrupting from fighters, no interrupting from coaches from the sideline. You want to protect that attention. All right, it's time to roll our Pokedex. I think this might be the saltiest part of the presentation. I want to make something very clear. Labels about things that are outside of a person's control are usually very harmful. and you should avoid them. Obviously, you do not want to say these kinds of labels out loud. However, when you have labels for specific types of cheaters and specific types of cheating, it makes it much quicker and easier for you to identify what is going on and make good calls. Labels about your actions are fair game. If you didn't want that label, you shouldn't have been a pooper bud. You should have just conducted yourself fairly instead. There are some times when people get those kinds of labels unfairly, but I gotta say, like in my experience, it's absolutely a vanishingly small percentage of the time. It takes a really long time to build up a specific reputation. Like, they matter. Forcing yourself to think deeply about every single instance of cheating with compassion and reflection is like ludicrous. Like, you have a job to do. You have 35 people to watch over and take care of. You have like 100 fucking fights to watch. Just get out of here with that. You can't do that. Now, I'm not saying call people these things. Don't do that. But I'm saying being aware of the specific types of cheaters and the situations that can create them can help you better select like where to spend your attention and what to be ready for and why these kinds of things happen. Types of cheaters. New players legitimately don't know. They need to help with their shot taking. It's probably reasonable to ask day one players to not participate in tournaments until they're able to adjudicate their own shots. Tournaments are not for fun. They're not for joy. They are fulfillment. Joy and fulfillment are two different emotions. Tournaments are about fulfillment. They are not always fun. They are about recognizing the culmination of your work. They are like a delayed gratification system. When you're in a tournament, like, it's nice if people are able to have fun. That part of the game is not for fun. Class games are for fun. Ditching is for fun. Winners, losers is for fun. Sparring is for fun. And those things can be like fun and educational. Tournaments are not for fun. Tournaments are for fulfillment. They are not for joy. You can take joy in them, but like as a Reeve, you are trying to create a fulfilling situation for people specifically. So I like to delineate those two things as completely different emotions because there's appropriate times for each thing. So another type of person who may cheat you, as we talked about, are out-of-shape players. Sometimes they get winded and can't detect their hits. It's unacceptable to fight at a level where you cannot play the game. Like, we love you. We want you to take better for yourself. If you feel like fighting is good exercise for you and promotes your health and wellness, that's amazing. I love that for you. You may need to consider pacing yourself. You may need to consider doing a little bit of conditioning work on the side to make sure that you're not harming anybody else's time with this sport, because they are welcome here too. We love you, but these are elements that you need to be wary of. I have been this out of shape player too. I definitely, when I started fighting again, I am not as lean as I used to be, and I had to pay special attention that I was not pushing myself so hard that I was like detecting shots too late to call stuff. That is certainly getting better, but there was a period of time where I had to fight a little bit more slowly than I would have liked to. Like, I couldn't do like 100% with how poor my cardio was because I would miss things. And it's like not an acceptable situation for your practice partners, and it's definitely not an acceptable situation for your tournaments. More types of cheaters. So you've got argumentative cheaters. So these are the kinds of dudes that think debate is fun. Debate is not fun. But I like debating. No. Debate is not fun. When people try to argue like specific technicalities and get like too deep into the nitty gritty of stuff to a point where they're just like, what this usually results in is people are kind of trying to like just make the conversation too frustrating to continue so that they can get a reset. So that's why you need to be able to watch out for this kind of cheater. Or they'll like do things like just like a staunch denial, but it's like really frustrating for everyone, and they're really like condescending about it and argumentative, and they just won't drop it after the Reeves have already called it. You got to kick those guys out. So you got company-backed cheaters. Company-backed cheaters are people, like every company has like one or two guys, I gotta say, and it feels ubiquitous and unavoidable and like one of those natural parts of life, but I don't know if that's just something in LARP that like I'm so used to that's what we see. But basically they're usually cheating everyone except the people within their company. and the company's natural response is to support their member. The player is mostly at fault for being manipulative. The company is also at fault for disregarding that external feedback. I have no fucking idea how to solve this, right? Like, this is like a friendship dynamic thing where you're more worried about like creating a rift between people by like getting this person out of the company. But you as a Reeve need to address their shot taking and force them to take it, and watch out for people when you see this kind of thing. So I remember a certain Super Smash Brothers analogy for the argumentative one. Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I can't think of anything creative right now, but that's on my YouTube. So this is another type you gotta watch out for. This is my least favorite type, and I think sometimes the hardest type to talk about. So you got COK back cheers. So a lot of times the counter argument for this is people say, well, knights aren't a monolith. If you are in a group with them, it does reflect on you. You don't get to fucking say that it doesn't. You don't. You could try, but you sound dumb when you say it. Like, it does reflect on you, and you do need to take it seriously, and you do need to try to resolve that situation in the way that you can, or at least be clear about it. And a lot of the time, you end up with like I've encountered like so many sword knights for over my like 25-year career. It's like, well, they do a lot of service work. They sit gate every event. Like, we would be lost without them. They contribute so much. Hire a fucking food truck. Get new people to do stuff. Throw them out. You don't understand what they are costing you in the background when they drive out other players, and you are participating in a situation where they're engaging in narcissistic behavior, and you are helping them find their supply of gratification where they are treating people like crap. Like, you need to try to deal with that. And there's been like, I've met so many multi-belt knights over the years. They're just gratuitous cheaters. Like, if someone has more that's been asserted, like, as a knight, more than one time, they should be the most honorable person on the block. I should not have to look at them. I should not have to call their shots. If I have to call their shots, something is seriously awry. And it's just super frustrating. And it's like a clear abuse of the posturing about like mentorship and role models that we like kind of put knights up to, but then we also accept this other clearly abusive behavior, and it's just really upsetting and really frustrating. If you cheat at the most fundamental aspect of our game, why should we hold you in authority or respect? God damn, thank you. Just appreciate, take, beautiful. Thank you. Yes. Throw these guys out. Throw them all the way the fuck out. I think it's perfectly fair to hold people that are higher on that power spectrum to a higher standard. You don't get more understanding when you start to climb that ladder. You get less. You are responsible for more. That's just how it is. More cheaters. These are opinionated. And if you feel like I'm talking about you, I'm probably not, because that means that you understand that like these kinds of things cause problems and you value that. I gotta say, like, it's been 25 years. Or in the words of, was it Rose Dawson from Titanic? It's been 84 years. I've been around the block. Great weapons specialists. Great weapons specialists. Really cute. My croutons, they steam my broccoli. They flip my wok. They're too much, man. They dice the green onions. They really make me fucking upset sometimes. So usually in other categories, that's not their main one, like single sword or sword and board or whatever. So people who use great weapons spend about 90% of their time outside an opponent's reach. They have far less experience in the critical moments of fighting because their fighting experience is hitting people from range where they can't reach them, backpedaling until their teammate kills them, or using a specialized rule set to be able to kill people in one hit or like break their shields or whatever. And they get extremely weird when they don't have those. So it's just something that I've noticed over the time is if you've got someone a lot of the time with like, hey, yeah, I'm a pole specialist, I'm a great weapons specialist, and it's like, man, like a disproportionate number of people who are in that category that don't take their shots. If you do not like that, you should talk to those guys about, creating a bad reputation. So it came in late, so this might have been addressed already, but at what point do you consider it active cheating versus a missed shot or a mistake? Is there a threshold, or is it just a vibe check you have to make on the spot? It's okay to come in late. So it's a little bit of all of the above. You need to be aware of the context of the fighting in your kingdom. So a lot of the times these people are well known and are talked about frequently. You need to take a mental check of like, how blatant is this cheating? Is it super easy to see? How many times does it happen? How many clarifications do you issue? What are the emotions of the people who are done when you are done fighting? Like, is everyone storming away from them mad? Like, you might not see it, but there's probably some cheating going on there. So there's like a lot of different vibe check things. That's why this presentation is so long and has so many details, is because like there are a lot of little contextual things to look at and things to consider. So I hope that answers your question, and thanks for stopping by. So I think this is the last type of cheater. Really tall dudes. Their body is a great weapon. That they're super used to getting what they want a lot of the time. I don't know if you guys have seen the research, but like tall men specifically are more likely, they have like a lower all-cause mortality. They're more likely to be seen as attractive by romantic partners. They're more likely to be up for promotions. They typically make more money. They're physically imposing. They're naturally stronger. They are frequently very unused to not getting exactly what they want. I got it. I'm fine with assault. I'm fine with saying this. My warlord and my fighting comeuppance for the first 10 years was exclusively beating tall dudes that cheated like hell. Like 3 different guys that just cheated in different locations too. And it was short me versus Elden Ring boss. And it was not fun. And no one was actually good. I just had to get good enough to get these guys to recognize that in the sea of green traffic lights that is their fucking lives, I represented a single yellow light where I'm like, you don't get to win today because I have actually trained with the best at this sport for an extended period of time. I'm going to beat you. And it's like that many dudes in a row. Like, unfortunately, there's a stigma there. I'm sorry if you're very tall. I could name a lot of tall dudes that are very honorable fighters, like Peter the Quick. If there was a Mount Rushmore of sweet boys, he would be 3 faces on that pyramid, right? Like, and then the 4th face is probably still Peter the Quick, because I can't think of a satisfying conclusion to that joke. Like, he's great. There's lots of other really tall people who are very good, but a lot of the time, for whatever reason, tall dudes get super weird when they lose sometimes. I think it's just like a social thing. It's my napkin math on social science. So this is probably more important than the types of cheaters, because a lot of that is kind of just my opinion. I think this is also my opinion, but these are like clear actions that people do where you don't have to make any character judgments about them preemptively. Sorry, but as a victim of relatively continuous trauma for much of my life, I am very suspicious of other people a lot of the time, and I do find that awareness is helpful, but it may not be helpful for you. But these are common cues that are just ingrained in the social aspects of fighting that, like, when you see them, when you are reeving, there are solutions to them, and they should immediately rouse your suspicion. So the first one is to shake it off. That's where, like, people get hit in the head, and they go, and it's like the most ridiculous, played up, obnoxious attempt at covering up something that was clearly your body. So boxers shake their heads when they get hit in the head to reduce their dizziness, right? Even dag-weighted swords just don't really carry enough force to do that to you unless you get, like, blasted in the jaw as hard as you possibly can. A lot of people were, like, shaking their head off and shit when they get, like, tapped with an Amtgard weight sword. are faking it. It is usually an indication of the person got hit in the body before the head, and they're trying to play that up to draw attention to get away from getting hit in the body or the arm. So this doesn't include shots that sting, like the eyes, the teeth, the ear, the nose. That legitimately stings enough. But the cue for that is usually like people will press into something that stings to calm the stinging. I'm talking about just like the head shaking, like they're concussed or something like that. Like if you are that concussion prone, you should rethink fighting without a helmet. And then additionally, at least for me personally, I don't know if my joint health is this poor, but shaking my head and my neck like that hurts me a lot more than getting hit with the foam sword. If you had like a truth or dare moment where like, Tato, I want you to shake your head like a dog trying to murder its favorite chew toy, having grown sick of it over the years, or I can hit you in the head with this foam sword, I would let you hit me in the head with that foam sword twice. Because shaking your head around like an idiot feels a lot worse than the shake it off nonsense. So the resolution strategy for this, when you see this type of clear cue, is you want to carefully examine the path of the headshot to determine whether or not the head was actually possible in the context. Kindly ask the receiving player not to feign injury and kick them out for cheating. More cheating cues. The long, silent stare down. I think this is probably the most common one. So you have a fighter expresses discomfort. The other refuses to clarify specifically. Somebody cheated. So that's just like when they do this like old time like mean mugging. Just look at each other. And sometimes people will say something like, the offender will say something like, that didn't hit me. It's doubtful. I didn't feel anything. You need to know what happened in the specific. Did it miss you? Did it graze you? Was it a missed stab? Did it hit your block? I don't know what happened. Motherfucker, you need to know. You need to know what happened. How can you win the tournament or win a fight without knowing what happened in the first place? Like, don't give me that I don't know what happened stuff after a long silent stare down. You want to clarify carefully. The context is really important to what's going on. And people don't get these kinds of reputations for nothing. So I think this is a situation where immediately I would check my mental bank for like the kinds of things that tends to give people away that are cheaters, especially like if I know the guy, is it likely? Like what am I going to spend my time investigating? So the resolution strategy is start with what you saw. The lead Reeve starts with that narrative and says, I think that this is what happened. You check with the other Reeves. You verify with the fighters to see if anything like weird and messy kind of pops up, and you kick the cheater out. Fighter calls light. So sometimes people will say like, oh, there's not a lot on it. Or I mean, you kind of got in, I guess. I didn't just, or they'll do like this motion. It was clippy. It was skimmy. It was skippy. It was sticky. It was like, like it's just, I'm sure you all have seen this one a lot. So I want to remind everybody there's no light in Amcard. They got hit. In sufficient force games, you want to think about the loading phase of the shot. So a shot doesn't have to be very fast to hit hard. It's more about like the follow through on that shot. Also, light is stupid, and you should change your rules because people abuse it 9 times out of 10. So the resolution strategy is this. So in non-sufficient force games, the fighter did all the work for you. They said that they got hit. Kick him out for cheating. In sufficient force games, you can examine the volume of the sound. If you heard it, it was probably good. If it had like an audible pop to it or like a big thud, try to recall the amount of like loading on the start of the swing or like the startup frames if you like fighting games, and make a reasonable guess about the level of force and kick him out. I think this is one that we see culturally, but we accept a lot of the time and for some strange reason. So you have a fighter that relaxes, then it kind of indicates that maybe they got hit, and then they suddenly attack and explode on the person after realizing that they were not hit. So the fighter, when they do that relaxation and then suddenly attack, or they might like attack like as the opponent is clarifying their shot, they have more or less non-verbally admitted that they were struck. pause to deliberate, and then they attacked again. So experience is necessary for this one because you need to be able to like look at someone who's fighting and see like what that relaxation cue is that looks like they're disengaging within range because they believe that the fight might be over. So the resolution strategy for this one, the opponent admitted to being hit when they stopped combat within range of the other person. In the case of just arm shots, you can reset the fight where you will say, okay, this person is not going to take any of the follow-up hits, and the person who paused, you're going to take an arm for that, you're going to take a leg for that, we're going to back the fight up. You could also just, I find it easy to just have like a little script, because this one is hard to explain. So you would just say, you non-verbally indicated that you were struck and then continued to attack without clarification. We are resetting the fight to this point. And then kick them out for cheating. Fighter asks for resets too early in the clarification phase. So the discussion is not yet closed between the Reeves or the fighters. The other fighter has not spoken or advocated for themselves yet. So if a fighter is asking for a reset too early, they're either uncomfortable with advocating or discussion, skill issue. You need to get comfortable with doing that. You need to practice it. Or they're trying to avoid unfavorable adjudication. So the resolution strategy for this, you warn the fighter for interrupting the Reeves because they interjected with this part of the workflow that is not a part of the workflow. You continue the discussion. You keep the interruption in mind for further adjudication because it's likely they'll continue to try to pull this. Consider kicking them out for cheating briefly before kicking them out for cheating. What if they stopped because they believed they struck the other person? So it depends on what the person who was struck, it depends on what they do. Right, so if someone stopped because they believed that they hit someone, but the person receiving the hit did not in any way, shape, or form acknowledge that hit, you have just lost, unfortunately. They can try to explain that, but you can't, you're not really supposed to call another person shots, and that's kind of a form of calling another person shots if you continue to, or if you stop fighting suddenly in the middle of the fight, and they have done nothing to indicate that they are going to take the shot. You can hope that the Reeves are going to back you up, and that's what the presentation is kind of about. But that's not the same thing as someone who, like, it appears that they have gotten hit. They pause and deliberate on whether or not they've gotten hit, and then they suddenly attack. That's the previous slide. It's on you. And one common tournament practice that everyone should be training is instead of stopping after you think that you've hit someone, you back up and egress to the safe zone and give them a second to calculate to see if they got hit or not. You should not be assuming that you hit anybody. And that's like a kind of a two-sided sword in the sense that, like, that certainly makes your fighting better and makes you less likely to get cheated. And also, it's understandable because a lot of the times, like, you can feel it in your hands, like when you hit someone's body. I can feel the difference between like hitting a hard target and a soft target with my sword because it just feels different in my hand, right? But you have to not stop, and you're not really allowed to make the assumption that you definitely hit the other guy. So if you think you hit them and then you stop because you killed that guy, and they made no indication that they were struck and they hit you without pausing, without making it look like yes they were indeed hit, then that's on you. So I hope that answers that question. So this is the clearest one, and I wish more people understood this. And I will continue to talk about it on stream forever, or at least until I'm tired of doing this, which may be forever. I'm having a great time. So continually throwing after being struck. This is the clearest cheating strategy ever, and it is confusing as to why it works so well. It is an extremely clear gambit. So remember how we talked about intention and memory being a resource. So Reeves can only hold, like my napkin math is 3 to 5 seconds of action in their head at a time. So what the person who is throwing a lot of times is doing is they are trying to intentionally extend the number of things that the Reeves have to remember in an attempt to exhaust their working memory. So it is cheating in any game to continue to throw after you get hit and assume that the opponent's shots do not count. My suggestion is if you throw one more time, you need to clarify that you thought the opponent's shot may have been late and accept the resolution from the Reeve. If you throw a second time after you were hit and you do not declare your own shot as invalid because it was late, you are cheating and you should lose the match. It is cheating, you should lose the match. The resolution strategy, throw these guys the fuck out. Get them out of here. This is why everyone hates Reeving Florentine. It's because people feel culturally entitled to do this because they don't understand how to fight Florentine. So they think, hey man, it's WWE time. This is a fucking storyline. This is my storyline as the heel, my comeuppance for being defeated in a previous tournament. And they go, wham, 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 wham. And the Reeves can't track anything because they have 700 shots to remember. And it's like, it's cheating. And you should lose the round. And you should be thrown out. It is very frustrating. I think that this is such a pervasive social problem in our games uniformly across kingdoms that every clarification phase should include this rule where if you continually throw after you got struck and you do not clarify, you are unable to clarify, you are cheating, you lose the round. You do it twice, you're out of the tournament. So you have to be able to adjudicate like what counts and what doesn't. And if you are throwing so much that you cannot do that, you lose the round. So here's some other unacceptable situations. So we've got continual resets. We've touched on this a fair amount. You don't beat a person 100% of the time when you're better than them. You beat them 60% when you're a good bit better, 75% when you're a lot better than them, 90% when you're an order of magnitude better. So if you keep resetting, essentially the person who should not be the winner of the fight, their percentage of being the winner goes up pretty dramatically with resets. So like the difference between like beating somebody 60-40 percentage wise and 50-50 is one fight and is a huge level of training difference. So you need to try to avoid resets whenever you can. That probably represents a year or two of training, in my opinion, to go from like 50-50 on someone to 60-40. So reset should be your last resort and not a first resort. The other unacceptable situation that I want to talk about is altercations. So these are not as clear as they seem, and they require a lot of care. So I think that there is kind of a pervasive white culture. I'm allowed to say this because I'm white. There's a pervasive white culture idea that it's okay for me to do whatever I want. And if you get upset with that and you disrupt the peace by becoming angry, you are the one who has done something wrong. And this is a situation where you have to handle the altercation with care because it may be, and is frequently is, the person who is remaining calm that is taking fun off of the table by cheating. So there's a high level of emotion in sports. Like training hard is literally painful. I've had countless physical therapy adventures and doctor meetups. I've met a lot of great people in my life because of my injuries. They're wonderful humans. People train for many years to win these tournaments. They're a huge time investment. There's a lot of emotional investment. There's a huge amount of like just generalized anxiety when you're trying to perform, that they have like a whole field of sports psychology to try to ameliorate that anxiety, right? It's the emotions are intense. So as a Reeve, it is important for you to be comfortable with people displaying emotions and not punish people for advocating for the sake of keeping like a temporary peace. So you'll have your peace when no one's playing the game anymore. Like if you do that, right? It's not about keep everybody calm, keep everything fun. It's about watching the situation and adjudicating it fairly so that these situations arise less of the time. So we talked about the common tactic, cheat but remain calm when confronted about it. It baits the other guy into getting frustrated. So the advocating person, they end up getting warned on conduct for disrupting the peace. And it's a lot of the time it's not their fault in that regard. So there's no easy solutions to this because it's context dependent, it's situation dependent. It depends on the players that are doing the cheating. So like, for example, obviously if someone's getting really upset at a 3-belted night, for not taking their shots, that's pretty valid because your institution lifted them up as a mentor, and it essentially failed to filter out a bad person from that esteemed position. Whereas, like, it's not as understandable to get really upset with a new player for not taking their shots, or someone who's like just doesn't have good cardiovascular fitness and are legitimately missing shots. So there's different levels to it. So you have to exercise a lot of care. Like, one thing to think about. So it's and this is just a thought experiment, but I want you to think about the difference between me and you specifically, and statistically, I probably bench press a lot more than you. And it's not okay for you to push me, right? It's not okay to push people in general. But the fact that I bench press over 300 pounds, doesn't that make it a little bit more egregious when I push you? I have a responsibility to use that extra physical power respectfully, just by merit of possessing it, right? There's a higher onus on me to do that. And I think the same thing is true of social power. Like, the higher you climb those ladders, the more you have to use those things responsibly. Unfortunately, our modern fucking political situation doesn't reflect that whatsoever, but that's just what I think about it. With great lifts come great responsibility. Thank you. Appreciate that. So, where are we at? And there's some advocacy that's excessively offensive, like swearing someone out, screaming in their face, getting physically too close to them. That's never allowable. Some behaviors, like we talked about, slamming your swords down on the ground is basically a proxy for like hurting the other person, and I think that should be an immediate ejection. It's not cool, and it's not okay. So you want to be mindful of the context. No easy solutions to this one. Is the person receiving the advocacy a known cheater? It's a question that you might ask yourself. If so, it's kind of your responsibility as a reef for not addressing it previously, so you need to pony up and deal with that. If the person who is advocating and getting upset and mad is like a known cheater, well, now they're causing two problems. You can just throw them out, right? Like, that situation is not difficult. So I'm just saying, like, do not allow conduct that is excessively offensive, but understand that emotions are running high, and it's up to you to be able to be comfortable with that and weather that and come to a fair decision that protects the integrity of the competitive aspect of the organization. Like, that is what you are doing when you are trying to read. That is the job that you are signing up for. So there's a last word on best practices. We're nearing the end. Thank you so much for sticking with me. As a reeve, you want to wear shoes that are appropriate to the ground. So cleats or turf shoes can be really helpful if you're on grass. Good sneakers if you're doing like a tournament on concrete with knee protection for the fighters, obviously. You want to try to be in reasonable cardiovascular shape, since if you're circling correctly in the positioning diagrams that we talked about, you're going to have to slowly jog around the circle and maintain your position in that fight, right? So over the course of 4 or 5 hours, that's a lot of like little short jogs. So you want to make sure that you are hydrating and eating and taking care of yourself. Be mindful of your positioning. You need to continually rotate around the fight for the best vantage point. And you need to not give up, because it's important to like be in the correct location to even be able to see the fight. So you don't want to give an opponent an advantage where they can like drive the other fighter out of position so that the reeves can't see them and then take advantage of it. You need to do your best to stay in the correct position. You also want to familiarize yourself with the actual timing of a half second. So shots that arrive outside of a half second are late. Have you ever sat down with a metronome? You can look it up on YouTube, like 60 beat per minute metronome video is going to give you 1 beat every second. If you get 120 beats per minute, that's a half second. So that's the timing. I will tell you, it's probably a little longer than you think. Like, you should sit down and watch one of those videos and listen to it for a while. My personal opinion is it should be a quarter second. Half a second is too long. Half a second is insanely long. If you could throw a shot that lasts longer than a half second, it's definitely like that scene from Austin Powers where that guy slowly runs him down with his steamroller while he's screaming, "Stop, stop, get out of the way," and it just goes on for an uncomfortably long period of time. So in the chat from Vidalia, we got, Hats to keep the sun out of your eyes, but not block your vision. Sunscreen too. Very wise. Those kinds of things too. It's very important. Okay, really last words on best practices. Get people who cause trouble out. Kick them out. Get them out of here. Just make them go home. Make them leave. Don't let them hang out if they're causing trouble and cheating. You have a cornucopia of tools now to identify these situations, to word them up, to address them. You have workflow systems to help you decide this stuff now. Kick those guys out for cheating. Kick them out. Just kick them out. Okay, so at this time, if y'all have questions, this is my open question time that I am allotting for. So if you guys have anything that you want to talk about, anything that was uncovered, now is the time to ask those questions because we are done. Well, we're almost done. Is that the last one? Yes, that's the last one. You just kick them out. But questions? Give it a minute for questions. So I play Lady Gaga's Bad Romance in my mind while reading to keep 120 beats per minute in my head. I think that is a fine suggestion. I actually love that. I'm gonna write that down because I don't know that song off the top of my head, but I will have that memorized. I don't have a pen. Oh my gosh, I don't have a pen. How could this be? Tragedy by the Bee Gees works as well for older folks. Oh. So the reeve in charge of a pit should be called a pit reeve. This is not a question. Well, what about the rest of the reeves in the pit that aren't the lead reeve, that aren't the pit reeve? What would you call those guys? Bonus reeves? I like bonus reeves. Extra reeves. Call them reeves. I feel like when you have, I feel like the name reeve, like as a category, my personal opinion is that the reeve is the category, is the top level of the archetype, and then you add the modifier to the different types of reeves to delineate like how are they different from the rest of them. But I think pit reeve is fine. I mean, if this catches on and you guys were to change the vernacular, like, I don't care as long as it's clear. And those titles should be a part of your tournament write-up. Line reeve's not bad. But we're supposed to be moving in a circle, so wouldn't that be circle reeves instead of line reeves? Ellipse reeves, in case of specific footwork. Could work. What do you think the best point breakdown for a tournament should be? Circumference reeves, yes. Oh, dome reeves. Yeah, dome reeves. Pitful, pitless. Okay, back to the question. I'm sorry, I'm obsessed with dome shield jokes now. We measure our reeves across the dome. So, what do you think the best point breakdown for a tournament should be? So that's off topic, but I will answer that. I like 4-2-1 and 5-3-1 pretty equally. I think my mood can actually change which one I like better a lot of the time. But right now, perhaps because of the wild turkey, I'm feeling generous, and I think that 5-3-1 is my favorite point breakdown. Because it rewards the consistency of being able to place in the tournament and get second. So like if I get first place and you get second, then you have to not only get like another second, but you have to get another placement after that, even if I don't place, to pass my score. And that doesn't make sense to me spiritually, I guess. I feel like if you are going to win the tournament overall, you need to be winning pretty much all of it. That's my opinion. Like when you give people the top level orders of the warrior, I feel like they should be dominant with all of the styles, and 5-3-1 reflects that the most. Whereas 4-2-1 is more, I feel like it over rewards specialists in a single style to an extent that I don't think is interesting. But that's purely an opinion thing. Scores that are outright, should be outright unallowable, are like 5-4-3-2-1 for fifth through first place, because that over rewards consistency and not dominance. So I don't like, or 3-2-1 for first, second, and third. Like you shouldn't. I think that's too rewarding. I think for second place and beyond. It's just my opinion now. So how do you deal with bad reeves in the moment? Is another good question. So I don't know if there's a way that you can, or at least I haven't reflected about it on it. If you're talking about reeves that are doing, oh gosh, I missed oblong spheroid reeves. God damn, I love that oblong spheroid reeves. So if someone's like reeving intentionally, unfairly to create like a specific winner, you should kick them out. That's another type of cheater. We can make a slide for that boy. But if you're talking about someone who's kind of just incompetent, unfortunately in a volunteer organization, we have to allow for that, and there's just not much you can do about that. Let's just snooze this ad break. We're almost done, so we're not going to do more ads. So you have to be able to deal with that. But I think if people are taking an interest in reeving, the best thing to do is try to like mentor them and help them out and help them make more calls. And it also depends on like what kind of bad. Like if they're just not legitimately seeing stuff and they're not good enough to, you could ask them to engage in some practice or watch some videos to increase their rate of calls. If they're not communicating with you or articulating themselves very well, that's a practice thing. And if they continue to reeve, a lot of the time they'll improve with that. So next question, what do you do if the only reeve volunteers you have are people you know are not going to be able to be confident making the calls or doing the job as needed? You need to get some fighters to help you reeve and take the lead reeve position, because a lot of those times the people that don't make calls are really just uncomfortable with leading that discussion. And if you get someone confident to lead the discussion, they will contribute. But if they're not going to be making any calls and you know that they won't, you can, if you have a surplus of reeves, you can ask them to sit down. Like if they're sucking up air and not contributing, just be like, I just need you to stay out of my way. It's like a fair thing to say. It's not very kind, and I'm definitely like not as kind and soft as I used to be. But if we got like 4 reeves looking at it, and I think like, and that someone is like blatantly not contributing, like blatantly not following the pit, like I think it's okay to be like, hey man, you need to either step up, or I think that you should just take a break and sit down because this isn't helpful. Next question. Wild turkey, not sagely. This is wild turkey rare breed. It's like one of my favorite. I treated myself. It's a little bit more expensive of a whiskey as far as wild turkey goes. So don't get too far on the turkey. It's not the best stuff. It's just been a very hard day. Sometimes I feel like, normally when I have drinks, I like to drink gin because it's a little bit gentler and I don't end up with quite as much of a hangover. But when it's been a real bad day, I kind of want my drink to hurt me a little bit the way that the day has. So that's wild turkey to the rescue in that case. How do you deal with cheaters that jump in and set the narrative early? Well, that's the reason that I came up with the workflow and the specific lead reeve job, is that they should be controlling the discussion. And if they're violating the flow of that discussion and speaking out of turn, they should be warned. And if they can't control themselves, they should be removed from play. So that's how I would deal with that. And you need a very confident person to be able to do that. I think this perspective for me was born out of like a recent reeving scenario where I'm deaf and I read lips. And to be able to understand a group conversation, in some ways, I need to be able to control that flow of that conversation to make sure that I am looking at the right person's lips at the right time to be able to understand them, and that no one else is like adding unnecessary noise and shit to the discussion, because I can't hear 2 things at once very well. So that's why I was like, hey man, like if I wanted to make this into a workflow that would work for me with what I've got, and that when you have like a accessibility issue like that, a lot of the times like if you address it with a good procedure or modification, that makes it easier for everybody forever. So that was actually the situation where that workflow was born out of. So if you guys want any more questions, now's the time, or we're gonna bring the puppy up and we're gonna say goodbye for the night. I'm gonna grab the dog. Hey buddy, it's time for work. Come on buddy, come on. Oh, you're very upset with me. Come in. Time to earn that rent. Up. Alright, come on, we don't have time for stretching. It's another great discussion. Thanks, Ken. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming to both of them. Appreciate you. So was this recorded? You missed too much? Yes. I'm going to do some minor editing to make sure that I pull like the breaks out and stuff. But this will probably go up within a few weeks. I don't like to advertise that it's definitely going to be up on my YouTube. I should probably find like a better designated wax YouTube or something for this. But it's going on my basic streaming YouTube for now. But I worry that the advertising cuts down. I'm like, well, it's going to be released, so why would I pop into the live stream? But you get to respond and chat, and it also makes it generally easier to do when people like interact. It gives me things to react to and things to talk about. He's a very good dog. He's the literal best dog. Snooze that again. I got one more ad snooze left. Oh, bloody. Good yawn. That's a relaxed puppy. All right, my friends. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I really appreciate it. I hope that this was at least a little bit distracting. Big yawn. Yeah, you called it. A little bit distracted for the state that the world is in right now. Thanks for having the emotional endurance to spend your evening with me. And it was definitely helpful for me to get to talk about something joyful in the midst of like the country burning down around us, but that's a topic for another time. Maybe I'll live stream that. Maybe. All right. Much left to everyone. Stay safe out there. If you need anything, let me know. Reach out. One more note. If you are into fighting, we have a Discord running. It's in the chat. It's in the Discord section below the Twitch readout. So if you like talking about fighting, we're doing like a weekly rocks review. We're talking about like experimenting with new drills and stuff. And there's also like 90% of this channel's content is like my gaming stuff. So we're talking about some fun games too. You get to use mang emojis and look at more pictures of my dog that the general public doesn't get to see. So feel free to stop by. If you haven't dropped a follow, please drop one. It definitely helps out the channel and promotes me a lot because algorithms are a hell of a drug. And I appreciate very much all of you guys for coming. Stay safe out there, and thanks so much. Love you all, and take care.